Hi, I'm Dan. Thanks for taking a few moments to consider Dimgaard. No, it's no fun to listen to a talking head, so I'll try to make this as succinct as possible, get you the information you want efficiently. So, the first question likely is, what is Dimgaard? And the direct answer is it's a D&D campaign. It began in the late 1990s as my solution to a dearth of low fantasy campaigns, and that's what I wanted. I wanted one that was rooted very close to what the actual history of the human experience was, and so it evolved in that. And it has evolved over time. It definitely has much more of a mid fantasy, mid wealth, mid magic campaign now than it did in its original incarnation. So there are lots and lots of D&D campaigns out there, and the question becomes, what makes Dimgaard better, right? And so obviously I have a bias, and you can discount that or factor it into your considerations, and I hope you will. I don't want anyone making a bad decision. But, as you can tell, I'm not the most persuasive of individuals. And I tend to make decisions based on facts. I hope people do the same. So I'm going to present only the facts here. So the first thing is, we have offered invitations to every entity that we know of and have made contact with to offer criticisms of Dimgaard, because we sincerely believe that the way you improve is through honest and direct criticism. And the truth is that it is just uncontroverted that Dimgaard is the best D&D campaign out there at the moment. Certainly in 5th edition. There are some rivals if you expand that beyond D&D 5th edition. But we hope to mature in those areas and just be across the board the best campaign available. So what makes us so much better? Why is it that we're better? Right? So from its inception, there were a core set of ideas that Dimgaard adhered to. And I formalized those over the years, and now it's a pretty rigid set, and there are 6 points. The first one is a very strong story. I mean, what I mean by a very strong story is I mean a compelling story, right? One where even at low levels, the fate of nations or even the cosmos rests on the decisions and actions of the players. Things have got to be very consequential. So that's one element of a good story. The second element that makes it a good story is the motivation of the parties involved, right? So we don't have simple villains, right? There is never an elemental good versus evil. There's always nuances involved. And the further we get into a story, the more significant those nuances become. Very, very often in the early episodes of a story, things will seem very black and white. These are the good guys. These are the bad guys. We're the good guys. We need to go do something about those bad guys. And then as we get deeper and deeper into those chapters, we begin to understand why the bad guys are doing what they're doing. They are competing for resources, or they have racial biases that they have to manage and overcome, or they have what they feel is the legitimate view of the way the cosmos should be ran that would be best for everyone involved if they could just impose that vision on everybody, right? So that's what we mean by a good story. While it may begin in the very early stages to be a pretty direct confrontation, we want that to evolve into a very complicated, very complex story that is more than just a cartoon. Right? The next one is we, since our inception, going all the way back to 2nd edition, when I first developed Dimgaard, I had a rigid adherence to the rules, and that is carried through. And why is that important? Right? So the rules form a framework, right? And if we're going to haphazardly go outside that framework, right, it is going to make it very difficult for the DM to prepare and trust the content, right? A DM knows when they pick up a Dimgaard module that if they are strong on the rules, right, their prep time will be insignificant in Dimgaard, right, because there's not going to be a situation that arises in Dimgaard where the DM doesn't know what to do. There's a very popular, quite well reviewed Adventure League module floating around right now where there is an invalid polymorph and so if you're running along there in Drift Manor and you hit that and you say, well, a Medusa can't be polymorphed into a T-Rex. What am I supposed to do there? Right? So your only option in those type of modules is to increase your prep time, and we don't want that, right? The whole point of a prepared adventure is you can hand it to a DM, and in 15 minutes they are ready to present that in an engaging and valid way. This isn't necessarily a Dimgaard only development, right? So that was very much the driving principle behind the Living Greyhawk modules in 3.5, and that was when Dimgaard moved from my individual campaign to a wider distribution, and I appreciated the importance of that, and that is why it is incorporated there. The other thing, this again is a carryover, is we incorporate the largest set of possible player options. Now, sometimes in 5th edition, things are just so overpowered, like the Tunnel Fighter feat, or Ambuscade, or the entire Psionicus Unearthed Arcana class, right? And we recommend in those very fringe cases that the DM not allow those. Some of them are pretty marginal, like the Lore Master Wizard subclass. But in general, the scalability of a Dimgaard module is sufficient that the DM can present a challenge to whatever a set of player options he chooses to, or she chooses to include. That is baked into the sauce there. The next one is we want to challenge all PCs. This goes hand in hand with that. And we want to challenge PCs at all levels of play, right? We don't want a party of low optimized, highly role-playing focused characters to be routinely TPK'd, right? We want that to be a fun, and that's a perfectly valid set of character archetypes, and we want that to be entertaining and engaging for them. We want them to have a valid path to victory. However, we also want those highly optimized tactical PCs to come away from a Dimgaard adventure feeling challenged, feeling that it was sufficiently interesting and tested their mettle to make it a legitimate heroic experience. And we have tinkered around, and we have developed a mechanism for on-the-fly scaling that requires little to no additional DM prep time that is, again, baked into the Dimgaard sauce. And we're quite proud of that. So the fifth one is just a reiteration, because I've mentioned it all the way through, and that is low DM prep time, right? It is a very marginal value for a DM to be presented with prepared material that requires as much prep time as if they were just going to prepare a session for themselves, right? The only time that there is utility to that is if a DM is going to be rerunning the same material multiple times, where they can leverage that extended prep time, and that happens. You know, there are people who run the same thing online over and over again, or at conventions. But the important point to us is that it's not required with DM skill, or with Dimgaard. The DM can just pick up the Dimgaard module, spend 10, maybe 15 minutes if there's something that he needs a refresher on. You know, underwater combat or mounted combat, right? Those are all noted up front. It's like, here are the things in this module that you need to be familiar with. And if you're not familiar with any of them, spend a couple of minutes to get familiar with them. And then the final thing is ease of presentation. I have to thank a series of reviewers on this. This is actually something that has evolved over the course of 5th edition. Initially, the layout of Dimgaard was just flow, break it encounters wherever that may fall. Thanks to reviewers like Merrick Blackman, who pointed out that if you're really looking to make things easier on a DM, you need to implement a format along the lines of one encounter, one page, right? And so we've done that, right? So the DM is going to have a much easier time presenting Dimgaard adventures. They are specifically formed for ease of presentation. That is something that once I began implementing it, I appreciated the importance of it. That I would have not had it not been for those reviewers. So that is an example of what I was saying earlier about how the way you get better is by finding good criticism, constructive criticism, examining it, and then using that to make you better. So that's what Dimgaard's all about. I certainly hope that you participate in Dimgaard. We don't get anyone who regrets participating in Dimgaard. The reason people fall off of our radar are usually issues related to we just produce so much Dimgaard material that we flood them with more than they need. That's by far the most common. People sometimes tire of the D&D 5th edition system and decide to opt to a different system like Pathfinder or one of the something like Shadowrun if they're looking for a different type of environment altogether. And then things of just life, I went back to school, my group fell apart, those type of things. So we are very, very satisfied that those who try Dimgaard universally admire it and compliment us on it. And in fact, we actively solicit criticism. So if you do decide to back Dimgaard and you find problems with it that you would like to address, we certainly wish that you would get those observations to us so that we can examine them and again incorporate those into improving the campaign. So again, finally, thanks again for considering Dimgaard, and if there's any issue that I can help you with, please don't hesitate to contact me.